The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Callie Olson. We are back, loving baseball when we were 12 and innocent. And I'm Ralph Tycho of the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Fred Wallin returns to these airwaves. It's been a long time, Fred. Thank you for being here.
I'm only 39, so time actually has not moved forward.
Well, that's true. That's true. Jack Benny was 39, and eventually it moved forward for him, but not for us. You're ageless, my friend.
Well, I don't know, but baseball is here. Baseball soon will be here, and they're going to put a statue at Dodger Stadium, matching the one with Jackie Robinson, Sandy Koufax.
That is long overdue. That's terrific. I wish you don't, but I wish it were Brooklyn, and where Sandy started his career with the Dodgers. And it was interrupted a bit in 1957 when both the Giants and Dodgers moved to L.A. I think you'll agree that the rivalry between these two great franchises has continued.
Yeah, except I think it's more from Northern California towards Southern California than vice versa. Obviously, there were years here where Cincinnati was in the Dodger and Giant division, and I think actually to the Dodgers fans, the Cincinnati Reds were the biggest rivalry. But to the Giant fans, I believe, and you would know this, the Dodgers will always be the number one problem as far as they are concerned.
Well, in our memories, if not anything else, tell me about your experience. I like to go back to age 12 when I talk to people and see.
Are you still there? Hello?
Are you hearing me?
No.
No.
Now
you're hearing me.
I didn't.
Okay. Okay. Technical problems. That's how it goes in podcasting. That's how it goes in radio. Tell me, I'll ask you again. What was it like being a baseball fan for you at age 12? It is my contention that age 12 is very significant for a kid. You are intellectually capable at that time of being a baseball fan, and the significance of being 12 is that you still have the enthusiasm. It isn't something that in later years were hardened, as it were, by debates, by criticizing baseball, being let down by baseball. But age 12, who took you to your first baseball game?
My dad, and in fact, at age 12, was the year that Sandy Koufax faced the Mets, the new Mets, and 9 consecutive strikes in the first inning, an immaculate inning as they called it later, and then we get after the 6th inning, and Sandy's got a no-hitter going, and my dad says, we got to go, and I said, he's got a no-hitter. And he said, but I got to get up at 6:30. My dad managed a butcher shop for like 40 years, so he had to get up like 6:30. So we had to remember that at that point at Dodger Stadium, I guess we're at Coliseum. I'm trying to think. Dodger Stadium. The game started 8 o'clock, so it was like 10 o'clock at night. So we drove home. So I listened to Vin Scully talk about the last 3 innings of Sandy's first no-hitter.
Wow. I recently heard a a tape of Vince Scully doing the last inning of Sandy Koufax's perfect game against the Cubs. And it was Koufax pitching, and I couldn't decide, listening to that, who was the hero of that game. Koufax pitched a marvelous game, naturally, but Scully's gift of communication was absolutely terrific. I miss him. As you know, I'm a Giant fan, but I would listen to the games on the radio with Scully, and even if the Giants were playing, I put his transmission on, and I think he was par excellence, the best I ever heard.
Well, I mean, it's hard to beat Vince Scully, and for Dodger fans, it's been like half a decade now that he's retired. And, of course, a couple of years ago, he lost his wife, Sandy. And so it's been a tough 5 years for Dodger fans, and certainly a tough 5 years for Vinny. At 90-something still, I think he could still do a darn good job. But, I mean, there's a time and place that people know when it's time to quit, except, of course, for Tom Brady. And Vinny did retire, and we miss him on the Dodger games, no question about that.
Absolutely. What was it like for you being a baseball fan before the Giants? A year before that, they were still in Brooklyn, and you were in L.A. Of course, you weren't a Dodger fan then. But what level of interest did you have? PCL was alive and well. Did you follow that at all?
First of all, I was a Dodger fan. The first game I ever saw was 5, and it's a true story. Snyder's up to the plate, and my dad, he was born in Chicago, but when they signed Jackie Robinson, he became a Dodger fan. So he points to the TV and he says, "That's the best player in baseball." And I swear, Ralph, the next pitch, Snyder hits a home run. So I've been a Duke Snyder fan and a Dodger fan since that day. So it was before they moved west. And so it was a perfect reunion for me because I got my favorite team. And before that, I was a Hollywood Stars fan. There were 2 teams in Los Angeles: L.A. Angels, which was the Cubs farm team, and the Hollywood Stars, the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I became a Hollywood Star fan. And my dad took me, my mom and dad took me to Gilmore Field to watch the Stars play when I was very, very young. And so I became a rabid Hollywood Stars fan.
Let's talk a little bit about the old PCL and what was significant about that league and why it was considered the third major league at the time.
Well, they considered it was AAA, but they sort of called it AAA plus, like you just said. It was the best of the 3 AAA leagues: International League, American Association, and Pacific Coast League. Pacific Coast League had the best players, in many cases, as far as farm teams were concerned, of the different franchises. So we had Steve Bilko hitting home runs for the Angels. We have Dick Stewart hitting home runs for the Hollywood Stars. We have Bill Mazeroski playing second base. Ramon Mejias, who I met a few times, and so it was Carlos Bernier played the outfield for the Hollywood Stars, and almost all the games were televised. So one was Channel 11 here, and one was Channel 9 here, and when it was the Angels against the Dodgers, of course they were televised on both channels simultaneously. So it was a kick. It really was as a little kid, and I was a staunch Hollywood Stars fan, and I think about them to this day.
Who is the one player that you miss from those days?
Actually, Bilko, even though he was an Angel. He just dominated. One year, I think he had 56 home runs. Another year, he had 50 home runs. In fact, if you remember the old show, and you're older than me, so you would remember this, the Phil Silvers show, Never Get Rich, he became Sergeant Bilko because of Steve Bilko. That's how big Steve Bilko was in Southern California, and basically
I never realized that that was named after him. That's terrific.
Phil Silvers was a baseball nut, so he named it after Steve Bilko, who of course had chances with the Cubs and chances with the Dodgers and elsewhere, but he wasn't quite up to his major league standards, obviously, but he was a dominant AAA player.
Mentioning him, and I think you mentioned another first baseman of that era, Stewart, brings to mind the DH and the elimination of the DH, or the elimination, not the elimination, but the inclusion of the DH in the National League now. Were you for that or against it?
Well, of the changes that they're making, I guess it's the best of the worst. I don't really care. I liked it when the National League didn't have it, and I liked it when neither league had it, to tell you the truth. But we're stuck with it because they're trying to get more runs. So of the ridiculous rules that Rob Manfred are pushing forward, I guess is the least worst, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I can live with it. And, as a Dodger fan, of course, if they go out and get Freddie Freeman, then, of course, they've got Muncy as a DH, I suppose, some of the time. Lux is a DH some of the time. So it's going to be the advantage of the teams that have money, and they'll score some more runs. So I guess we're going to live with it. And I really don't think Manfred knows what he's doing. So understanding that, I guess I have to accept the DH.
They agreed on the rule changes for 2022, but now they're saying that the phantom runner on base in extra innings is likely to return. Am I dreaming about that, or why would they put that in there at this late stage?
They said, from Major League Baseball side, base management side, they said it's for safety's sake. I have no idea what that means. If the COVID thing develops again with another variant, you're sitting next to somebody anyway. So if you sit next to somebody 10 innings or 12 innings, I don't imagine the odds of you getting it might be much worse. I have no conception of why they're doing something like that. Not once in my life, and like you, I was listening on transistor radio when I was a little kid, and I'd listen to the Dodger games. I try to get the Giant games, and once in a while you get the Cardinal games here, actually at KMOX in a weird scenario. But, I got a lot of the game that was called DXing, where you try to get the distant stations. But the point being, not once did I ever care how many innings it took to win or how long a game took. And, again, I don't think Manfred understands. The average age of a fan is like 55 to 60.
55. That scares me. What is baseball doing to attract the younger fan and to make fanatics out of them? It's a rhetorical question, but that's where Manfred is missing the boat, as far as I'm.
He thinks that if he forces the pitcher to throw it every 14 seconds or 19 seconds if there's men on base, that's going to keep younger fans involved in the game. That's nonsense. I don't think anybody's looking at their watch and saying, oh, he takes 31 seconds instead of 19 seconds. And then the other rule, which they're going to try in the low minor leagues this year, but this one is almost beyond belief. A pitcher, the guy on first, can only throw over there twice. If he throws over there a third time and there's not an out made, he doesn't get the guy picked off, then the guy automatically gets second base. Now, Ralph,
that's crazy. That's crazy.
Nobody that's nutso, right?
Not only is it nutso, what they're doing, after they throw over one or two times, you're telling the opposing team that they're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
So take a bigger lead. It changes the dynamics and the strategy of the game. And here's one. How about bigger bases, larger bases, folks don't realize that 90 feet has been the cornerstone of Major League Baseball all these years. And by making it, say, 89 and a half feet or 89 and a third feet, it changes what is a hit and what isn't. So you're messing with the record book forever with that.
Well, again, here in Los Angeles, Maury Wills and Lou Brock, of course, with the Cardinals, and later Ricky Henderson, and the records that you just indicated don't mean quite the same. And baseball is based on records. I mean, there's always – that's why if you're going to play a 60-game season, I don't even count that as a Dodger or a World Series victory, to tell you the truth, but 2 years ago. But the point is, if you don't play the regulation number of games, you can't really talk about records because if you played on 162, you obviously have an advantage over anybody who plays fewer games than that. And so, yeah, it's 89 versus 90 feet can make a difference because a lot of close places, a lot of close plays at first base, a lot of close plays at second base, and certainly trying to score a run. I mean, I don't think Rob Manfred understands the game or the love of the game that a lot of us have had, as you indicated, just from a very, very young age.
Yeah, it said one thing they're doing though is that they're having each team play each other team, no matter what the league is. They're going to play a series with that team. So that's how they're going to do interleague play this year. And in thinking about that, it balances out the schedule a bit. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, but I don't want to cut the number of games under any circumstances that the Giants meet the Dodgers or the Dodgers meet the Padres. I don't want to do something like that. So if it doesn't cut back into that too much, if you go from 19 to 18, I can live with it. If you stick at 19, that's fine. I don't want to cut back much more than that as far as that is concerned. I can live without seeing the Pittsburgh Pirates every year. I think a lot of fans around Southern California or Northern California can do likewise. So it's fine if you want to see, 3 games or something like that. But I don't know why it should be mandatory. It's just, again, I don't think they understand. I really don't. The Dodgers have nothing against the Pirates and vice versa. The Dodgers do have something as far as they want to beat the Padres, as far as Peter O'Malley's kids and nephews run the Padres, and so there is some active disagreement as far as the Dodgers and the Padres are concerned. So I don't want to do anything that would destroy that in any case, shape, or form.
Was Peter O'Malley a good owner for the Dodgers?
I think, to me, Peter O'Malley was one of the nicer people you're ever going to meet in your life. But as far as, yes, because you saw what happened afterwards. I was very sorry he sold the team immediately. He sells the team to Fox, and immediately they trade Mike Piazza, who was the first catcher, I think, to hit 400 home runs in his major league career. But anyways, yes, I think he was. And, people are down on Walter because of, obviously, Brooklyn would be down on Walter. But Peter was different. I think Peter was a square shooter. And they had Fred Clare as general manager, another square shooter. And so, yeah, I think he was. And what we've seen afterwards, I know he was, versus what we've had afterwards as Dodger fans, it's almost insane.
You mentioned Fred Clare. You've known him for years. You're friendly with him. Tell me about him. Well,
he used to be a sports writer and then PR for the Dodgers, ended up general manager for the Dodgers, and as indicated, you want in life, and my wife always talks about this, and it's true, you want communication and you want honesty and being a square shooter. And it's tough being a square shooter as general manager because you've got to tell the press one thing when you know it might not be true sometimes. But to me, he's always been, every time I interviewed him or asked him a question, he was as honest as he could possibly be. So I think Peter was as honest as he could possibly be. In fact, I'm going to tell you a story. When I'm doing Dodger talk in the late 80s, some of the Dodgers didn't like me. The reason they didn't like me was because I said Steve Sachs had a problem throwing from second base to first base and things like that. And then And then they tried to get me
A
fired.
little honesty goes a long way.
So
I mean,
one day, Mike Socia, Mike Marshall, and Steve Sachs, and Socia came up to me and says, we need to see you. So we walked in the Dodgers dugout, and we started talking, and they said, why'd you say things like that? And I said, because it's true. And as far as Mike Marshall was concerned, I never even said anything negative about him. In fact, he had a bad back, and every time somebody would say, he's not hitting, I would say, I've got a bad back. I had scoliosis at the time. I know what that means, having a bad back. I don't have to face pitchers who throw 95 miles an hour. So Marshall shouldn't have been in the meeting. Socia was there because he was the captain, and Sachs was there because he's a low life, and it's always been a low life, and will never be anything but a low life. But of course, he ran for mayor of Sacramento at one point. But so that's the situation. So the bottom line was, Peter O'Malley actually brought me into his office, and he says, Fred, nothing to worry about. We know you love the Dodgers. I'll get them off your back. And so how can I do anything but love Peter O'Malley? And historically, every year he sends me holiday cards, and we send them back and things like that. So to me, Peter O'Malley was a great owner, and he knew what I was doing, and he knew that I loved the Dodgers. But, and he even wrote me a letter, which I wish I still had. When I moved, we lost it. He said, we liked you because we know you love the Dodgers, but you were the first objective on the air talk show host, the Dodger talk host we ever had. And what he was basically saying was the other ones were kissing their behinds, and when they were playing badly, I said they were playing badly, and I'll stick to that for the rest of my life. I think I've lost you.
You're back.
Oh.
We keep cutting in and out. I hate to say this because I'm not really a Tommy Lasorda fan, and I know you are. I hate to bring it up. Tell me something I don't know about Tommy Lasorda that would impress me.
Tommy called me a second guesser, so you have to understand that. So one time in the late 80s, and he's pitching batting practice, throwing 65 miles an hour or 70 at the time, and I got in the plate against him. He said, come on in. He actually threw behind me. Now, I could hit. So, it wasn't like I was an athlete growing up, so I was fine. But I'm just saying that he would just try to be funny. Tommy was Tommy. Tommy had to have his way, and if you weren't 100% at all times that he thought in your corner, then you had a problem. He did call me a second guesser, and in fact, he passed now, but 3 years ago, Fred Clare had a big golf thing, and we had a party afterwards, and Tommy was there, and Tommy was there. He didn't remember me. He was like 91 at the time. But I said, I'm the second guesser. And it was almost funny because my wife said, why'd you say that? And I said, I wanted to see if he remembered me. And, of course, he did not. He was getting more than 90 years of age at the time. But, it's just you're doing a sports talk show or a Dodger talk thing or a sports talk thing on the Dodger station. And I don't listen to local radio for a long, long time. But I do think the fan gets the best of it if you're as honest as you can be. And I don't know about you, Ralph, but do you believe that a lot of talk show hosts or giant talk hosts or things like that are allowed to be as honest as they can be, or do they want to be as honest as they can be, or do they want to just be Giants, or Dodgers? I don't think that's fair to the fans. And if you're talking, I lost you again.
You got me back, Fred?
Yes. I hope you're technical. I'm here if you are.
Okay.
I lost you again.
And you are Am I back?
Now you're back, yes.
Okay, thank you, technology. Fred, let me ask you about your baseball playing career. How did it start? How far did you go? And what was it like when you stopped playing ball?
Okay, so I had a very good arm. So I always played third base or shortstop, and once in a while pitching, but mostly third base. And then when I was 13, I thought it was smart to throw a tennis ball in the off season. And I come back, and I can't throw. And my dad was ambidextrous, and I was right-handed. And I tried actually for weeks to throw left-handed. And we go into our backyard. If my dad wasn't home, I'd actually throw to my mom. But I never got, I couldn't throw well enough left-handed to make anything out of it. So basically at the end of Colt League, I was out of it, but I was no longer a third baseman. I was a second baseman or a first baseman because I didn't have the arm to do otherwise. And I really love baseball. You know, I like basketball and all, but I really love baseball. And it, you know, it sort of devastated me for a time because all kids have this dream. And I was pretty good. I mean, I worked harder than almost anybody. I wore weights before people wore weights, so I could basketball, so I could jump. But it also helped me in, I'm sure, in baseball from that aspect. And I started at the age of 5. In fact, the funniest story is I'd go to school in Culver City, California. I'd come home, and there was a park right next to the school called Blanco Park. And so now I'm 6 or 7, and we'd practice as kids, you know, from like 3:30 to 5, and then some of the days after 5, the Culver City Comets came to use our field, and they were like a champion fast-pitch softball league, girls, and they basically took me under their wings, and sometimes in practice they'd let me play right field or something like that at 6 or 7 years of age, and I think in the late 50s they actually won the national title at one point, and so I actually learned to play baseball by learning to play fast-pitch softball, and it was tough then because at that point, if anybody that knows the women's game, the mound was closer than it is now. It was like 3 feet closer. So, you know, a 7-year-old kid, they didn't throw as hard as they could to me, but I'm just making the case that I learned to play baseball by the women of Culver City Comets and at Blanco Park in Culver City, California.
Did you ever have any of those women on any of your shows later on in life?
No. It was long gone at that point. I mean, it was like when I started doing radio, I was still right out of college, and the answer to that question is no. I wish I had. That's a great idea, actually, if I could find one of them. But I don't remember their names, to tell you the truth. It was so long ago that I have a pretty fair memory, but I don't remember their names. So anyways, the Culver City Comets will be in my memory as far as teaching me to play the game forever.
Beautiful story. I like that. And I like that you had women around you from the age of 5.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't have been bad for your head.
I had my first girlfriend at about 8 years of age, 9 years of age, and I had her for, no joke now, until she transferred to another school. See, Culver City, and next to Culver City is Hamilton High School, which is a city school. In fact, that's where Al Michaels went. And Rochelle, unfortunately, transferred to Hamilton, and that was the end of the relationship. I've talked to her a few times in the last 60 years, but it's been an interesting, when we get together on the phone, there's some interesting conversations. That's all I can tell you.
When you started at age 8, it had to be interesting, for crying out loud. Did your parents like her? And did her parents like you?
I'm sorry, what?
Did her parents like you, and did your parents like her?
My parents loved her, and I don't know how they felt about me. I can see we were 1 block away. I was on Stevens Avenue in Culver City, and she was on Mallet Way, which is like 1 block. So we'd walk home together from school and things like that. And unfortunately, her parents, I don't think they moved away just because of me. It's a joke, but they moved away.
Okay.
And the end of that.
Okay, what did you major in college? You ended up being a broadcaster, but was that by design or accidentally?
Oh, accidentally. Political science. I love politics more than I love sport, to tell you the truth. I started calling sport. I started talking. There were no sports talk shows when I was growing up, or when you were growing up. I would talk politically at the age of 12, and I lived in Culver City again, and KABC Radio 790 was the number one talk station at that point. And it got to a point where there was a guy named Steve Allison, not Steve Allen, Steve Allison from Washington, D.C., and they called him the man who owned midnight. And I called him at the age of 12, 13, 14, things like that. And the producer, I do remember Joan Lennox was her name. She liked me. So she said, why don't you come on down and do an hour with Steve? So honestly, at 14 or 15, I did a couple of hours on Los Angeles radio with one of the best talk show hosts of all time in Steve Allison. So that's how much I love politics, and I love talking. But I never thought of going on the air. I became a KABC producer, ironically, when I was in college. And I would my number one job, Ralph, was they were too cheap, KABC at the time, to have a traffic reporter at the time I was there. And my number one job, was to steal KNX 1070 news radio's weather reports and traffic reports and type them up for the guys on the air in the morning. So that's how I learned about radio right away.
So they wouldn't have to hire traffic guys or weather people?
Later or before, I don't remember this, they had Kelly Lang, but at that point they didn't have anybody. So it was just, I guess, for economic reasons. So my number one job as a college student, before I would go to college, I'd be there for 4 hours in the morning, and I would steal the weather and the traffic reports from the other stations and things like that. So,
well, at least you were learning how life really works.
Yes, that's very young. In fact, it's funny you said that, because I told my mom, and she started laughing, and that's exactly what she said. Son, you will learn. That's the way life goes on.
Yes. What disappointed you most about baseball's changes over the years?
I'm trying to think. Well, right now it's Rob Manfred, but historically, I don't know. I don't think they care about the fans. When you and I started going to games, Ralph, and I don't remember exactly in Los Angeles, but I think it was either, again, my dad managed a butcher shop for 40 years, so we were just like middle class and lower middle class from that aspect. My mom didn't work; she took care of 4 kids, and the prices were like either 1, 2, or 3, or 3, 4, and 5. And now, in fact, Team Marketing does a report every year. I haven't opened up the thing on my iPhone, but I believe if you go to a Dodger game now, family of 4, parking, one hot dog a piece, 1 Coke a piece, and things like that. And the ticket price is over $400 for a family of 4. Now think about that for a moment. I don't care inflation, not inflation. If you're an average person and you make $50,000 a year, how often can you take a kid or your wife and your family at $400 each time? You can't, because you're only making $700 or $800 a week, $900 a week, and you're going to spend half of it or almost half of it on one baseball game? I don't think so. So I guess that would be it, is that the average fan is not thought of as a very important part of the pie.
Wow, that's very well put and very depressing, I must say. What can change that? What about baseball can change to bring in the young fan?
Lower the prices. A couple times a month, I would say, let's have a throwback day where tickets aren't 30, 40, and 50. Maybe they're 5 and 10. So a guy can take his girlfriend, or a girlfriend can take his, the guy, whatever the case might be. I got to be politically correct here, I know.
I always like it better when the girlfriend takes the boyfriend.
Yeah,
That's how. Sadie Hawkins a little bit. Why not? Give them a chance to take that assertive role and start things rolling. And I think men and women should be treated totally equally in dating and everything else. Wow. It just scares me that they're not going to lower the prices once or twice a month, and that with the average age of a baseball fan being 55, 20 years from now, kids are not going to have the memories to draw upon and the experiences with family and friends who accompany you to the game. These are things that are in my mind, and because I had them as a child, and kids and grandkids will not have that experience. And it's very sad.
But you know what, Ralph? 50 years from now, I'm not sure we'll have pro football either. We might have flag football, but with all the stories of CTE, I'm not sure that parents will allow their kids to play tackle football. And I played 1 year of Pop Warner, and that was enough for me. I didn't particularly like going over the middle. I was like a wide receiver or slot back type guy, so basketball and baseball. But I was a pretty good football player. But with the CTE every day now, good football players dying young, I'm not sure we'll have football either. So it's going to be a different world. And when I see around the corner in 50 years, Ralph, at 150, 130, it should be interesting, no question about that.
I know. I'll be a little older than you, not just now, but then too. And you'll enjoy reminding me.
Every day.
I love it. Tell me about Sports Byline and what you do and how you got it, and because you've been nice enough to have me as kind of a regular guest for these past few months, and I hope it's going to continue. I think it's a kick in the ass when syndicated radio, which Sports Byline is, can have 200 outlets plus Armed Forces Radio, plus all the outlets in different countries, and reach as many people as they do. Whose idea was that in the first place? I know it wasn't yours, but how did that come into being?
Okay, so Ron Barr and Darren Peck started Sports Byline in San Francisco more than 32, 33 years ago. And before ESPN, it was thinking about going syndicated national radio. They were on TV, but they weren't syndicated radio at that time. And so it started a long, long time ago. In fact, I worked for a company that actually was before Sports Byline, the American Sports Radio Network. A friend of mine from Las Vegas, Ritter Grissard, started it in the early, right before Byline, in the early 90s, like 90, 91, 92, and 93, 94. We were doing a show. It was called, first it was called, it was called the Sports Network, then it was called the American Sports Radio Network. And I was on 3 to 7 in the East, 12 to 4 in the West, and I'd fly from Los Angeles to Las Vegas every week, and then they figured out that you didn't have to do that actually with something called ISDN, as I know you understand. It's a way to at that point. I actually could do it from Southern California and eventually from my house, so it was a lot easier that way. But we were doing national radio at the same time Byline was doing national radio. Then American Sports Radio went under, and they sold to Yahoo Sports. It was called something else at the point. I forgot what it was called. And they offered me a job, but I'd have to move back to Vegas. I had just gotten married, so I ended that. But anyway, so I met Darren Peck of Sports Byline, and we liked each other. So over the last 30 years, I've done about 20 years of sports Byline, and now Sports Overnight America. And again, from 10 o'clock at night Pacific till 3, it's heard in a lot of places. It really is. In the daytime, it's heard on some stations, but those 5 hours, it's heard on Sirius and it's heard on XM. It's heard in a lot of places, and people like you keep people awake all night long. That's our job.
And what a good job it is. Talk about Sirius. A lot of people don't even know of its existence at this point. How has it affected and changed radio as we know it?
Well, it just has, a million stations, and it's got, their number one guy has always been Howard Stern, and I'm not particularly big on Howard Stern. I hope Howard's not listening to this. I actually like the late Don Imus more, but they've got shows in every particular field, sports among them, but certainly not all sports. I mean, they've got everything. They've got politics, they've got weather, they've got news, they've got everything, and they've got a slew of customers, and people listen to it as they drive in their car and whatever. But, as I indicated, also fewer people now than ever are listening to local radio. And just based on the numbers, when the Arbitron comes out, you can see that. What is that, Nielsen or the Arbitron? I don't know, whatever the numbers come out, they're lower. Like KBC here in Los Angeles, 30 years ago, we got ratings like 4.8, 5.1. Now KBC radio in Los Angeles is like 1.0, so 1/5 or whatever the case might be. And it's not because KBC is bad, just not as many people listen to radio, period. And so it's very, very tough indeed to keep that audience. So Sirius is a national thing, so more people simply listen to Sirius than would have 30 years ago, because they're not listening to local radio. And I don't know if you listen to local radio where you are, but I do not. And so Sirius is a help for people like us.
Well, local radio that I listen to is KCBS, because it's 24 hours and it's consistent. But Sirius is something that car companies are building into their new automobiles.
Yeah.
So that I think that's been a tremendous boom to them. If you buy a new Chevy, for instance, automatically you turn on the radio and you're a subscriber, and that helps.
Yeah, there's no question about that. And after, for the first couple of years, in some cases, you don't even have to pay for it. Then after that, you do. So it's a win for you, and it's a win for Sirius, and it's a win for the car company, because maybe it helps them sell you the car. And then if you like Sirius, you stay with them. So that's a help to Sirius. And if you like it, it's a help to you because you like the stuff. But let me ask you, I used to listen down here to KCBS 740. Is it still 740 on the dial? Yes,
it is. Yes, it is. And it is, as far as I'm concerned, they've made some changes recently. But two of my favorite people, Bruce McGowan, is no longer, Joe Salvatore is no longer with them. It's all about money, and just like anything else, they will, the experienced person will be let go over money. In other words, we can hire a college graduate and give them half the money they're making, and that's part of life too.
Maybe that's why fewer people are listening to local radio. Again, we're older, so maybe we're not saying this objectively, but we might be able to answer a question or have more of a background. I'm not just saying sports, but just in life, than somebody 35 or 30, because they weren't alive and we were. So as long as we have half a brain left, the logical thing is maybe hire an older person because of the knowledge that the older person might have versus the younger person, and just being alive longer. And so I think the program directors and the general managers just aren't getting it, and maybe that's the reason fewer people listen to local radio. But when I was big, the DXing, and then I got my license, and I'd listen to Stanford basketball on 740 KCBS. Don Klein, who I always thought was a great basketball announcer and things like that. And then I'd listen to KNBR. In fact, I filled in at KNBR 30 years ago now, and it was a kick. And but you mentioned Bruce McGowan. He was nice enough. He was the guy. Like, I was on there 3 days, 3 nights when I was filling in. He actually drove me from the hotel to the station and back most of those 3 nights. So I met Bruce, ironically, by filling in at KNBR.
Bruce is the warmest, sweetest guy in radio. Let me just, you notwithstanding, of course.
And not just because you and him and I agree politically, right?
We do, and we haven't talked politics in a long time, and we'll save that for another show. But our views are absolutely married. The views are so close together. Bruce's too. And it's just a matter of we can't understand it. We just can't understand what's going on, and I don't think it's ever going to be the same in this world. We are so polarized that it's just, how's it going to get better? Maybe the Putin thing will bring us together as a country.
This week on PBS, they did back-to-back documentaries on Putin. And I had seen the first one years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago. But the second one was brand new, and they run them back-to-back. Folks, if you get a shot, you have to go to PBS, and maybe your point well taken. I think as more and more people know what kind of a louse this guy is, maybe it will shake things up a little bit because, what's happening in Ukraine, and all 4 of my grandparents came from the area, but what's happening in Ukraine, and you look at the train stations, it's got to remind you of Nazi Germany. And if it happened in Ukraine, can happen here as easily as that. And that's why, folks, sports is important, but politics, you got to keep aware because there are people who would not care about bringing something like that to this country. And anything political, if they can make their own gains, they would go in that direction.
Hey, listen, this has been a terrific podcast. Thank you so much, Fred. Please come back.
Go Dodgers.
Go Mets, go Giants, I don't know. I tell you who I liked in the 90s was the Los Angeles Angels. Yeah. I was the Topps representative for the 80s and 90s. I would go out and sign players to contracts with Topps that would obligate them to big league pay when they got there. We could use their picture on baseball cards, and in return, they're obligated to us. So I met an awful lot of players, coaches that I grew up following. It was tremendous 13 years. Every summer I would go to the Northwest League and the California League and enjoy. My favorite people, for one reason or another, came out of the Angel organization. Tom Kochman was a minor league manager, and the teams I visited that were first-year teams, rookie league, short A season, and what have you. And not just the Angels, but historically, baseball hires their most competent coaches to greet these kids and introduce them to baseball, to pro baseball. And the Angels were blessed with a guy named Tom Kochman, who handled, I think it was Salem in the minor leagues for the Angels, and it was the most it was the most consistent organization back in the 80s and 90s, and had some great friendships. So, Fred, we'll talk again real soon. We're up against it time-wise.
Be well, and again, go Dodgers, folks.
If you say so, Fred, you're the man. I'm not going to blow against the wind, or you won't have me back on your show.
Be well, everybody.
Be well, my friend.
Bye.
See you soon. Thank you for listening, everybody. Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Loving baseball when we were 12. Good way to start off a show. Be well.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices, and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.